Welcome to Citizens Climate Radio, the podcast that helps you understand the climate policy news behind the headlines. I'm Peter Santiscano. Each month, we bring you timely updates from Capitol Hill and beyond, breaking down complex topics and showing how you can make an impact. In this episode, you will hear big news from Citizens Climate Lobby regarding our leadership. But first, we're continuing our new series with CCL's Elissa Tennant and Dana Nuccitelli. They team up to help you navigate the fast-changing world of climate legislation. Today, they're diving into the latest news and research on the Inflation Reduction Act and how repealing it would hurt American families and businesses, I imagine, too. So what's in the new text? What's at stake? And how can climate advocates respond? Elissa and Dana, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Peterson.
Hey, Peterson.
Hey. So I've got a question actually for you first. What's one climate policy term or phrase you wish more people understood and why?
I'm going to say the concept of net zero emissions, that's just when you're pulling as much carbon out of the atmosphere as you're adding in a given year. And so you're not increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And some people will say that that's not good enough because our emissions aren't zero. And some people will say it's actually an impossible thing to reach. We can't get to net zero emissions. And really, it's not only is it possible, it's actually a good target because once you reach net zero emissions, that's when global warming stops. And that's what we're trying to do is get global warming to stop.
And mine segues nicely into our discussion. Mine is budget reconciliation, which is not directly a climate-related term, but something I had never heard of before I came to Citizens Climate Lobby. And it has such a big impact on so many policies, but that includes climate and energy. And I wish that more people knew what that one meant. But I get it, because it's a really long process.
Same. It was a new thing for me until recently. So yeah, I agree. Great. I love those answers. Thanks so much. And thank you for taking over the mic today. Listener, you are in absolutely good hands. I'm handing it over to you too, and I'll see you at the end of the show.
Thank you, Peterson. All right, and thank you for listening and for joining us. And later in the show, we will share some listener voicemails with you along with our responses, and we will tell you how you can leave your own voicemail or question for us. But first, Dana, we are knee-deep in budget reconciliation. Let's talk about it. So our last episode covered the release of the House Ways and Means Committee's version of the budget, which gutted the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax credits. And the House ultimately passed their version of the budget, and negotiations have now moved to the Senate. So let's set the scene. Let's get some background. What's happening in the Senate right now?
So now all of the Senate committees have released their text, their version of what they want to do with the budget reconciliation bill. The last committee to go was the Senate Finance Committee because they have kind of the most complicated and the most stuff to do, including addressing what they want to do with the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax credits. So they've now released their text, and now it's going through what's called the bird bath, which is when the Senate parliamentarian checks all of their proposals and makes sure that they're suitable for the budget reconciliation process.
Talk to me more about the bird bath. I don't know if we mentioned it in our last episode, but I feel like it's a term we can't just throw out there and then leave.
We talked about the parliamentarian, whose name I think is Elizabeth McDonough. I hope I didn't get that wrong.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out to Elizabeth. So in any case, in order to qualify for the budget reconciliation process in the Senate, each provision has to be primarily budgetary in nature, meaning that it affects the budget, and that's like the primary thing that it's meant to do. It's not just like some change to a regulation that has maybe some minor little side impact on the budget. It has to be like focused on the budget. And so the person who decides if the provisions are each focused on the budget and budgetary nature is the Senate parliamentarian. And it's called the bird bath because it's named after Senator Byrd, Robert Byrd, I think, a long ways back from West Virginia, who kind of created this whole reconciliation process. And this is one of the rules, that it has to be budgetary in nature to fit into the budget reconciliation process.
Okay, and we learn something new every day. So the Senate Finance Committee is kind of the Senate counterpart to the House Ways and Means Committee, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
you got it.
Good. That's what I was told, so I wanted to make sure nobody was lying to me. So how is the Senate Finance Committee's proposed budget different from the House bill? Let's get into it.
Yeah, so they definitely improved on the House version when it comes to the clean energy tax credits. And they gave a number of them kind of a longer runway in terms of when they're being phased out, like the clean electricity tax credits. The House version essentially effectively just repealed them immediately for all practical purposes, whereas the Senate version it treats different kinds of energy differently. So solar and wind energy, it phases them out starting after 2025 through 2027. So it's still quick, but at least it's not immediate. So that's an improvement. And then these other sources of clean energy we tend to call them like clean firm because they're sort of more like baseload energy. They're not intermittent, not reliant on the weather. So these are things like geothermal power, nuclear power, hydroelectricity, and batteries. They got a much longer runway. They don't phase out until the 2030s. So they're in pretty good shape. That's especially good for us for battery storage because that's really important for addressing the intermittency that comes with solar power that relies on when the sun is shining. And so then if you get lots of sunshine, you can store some of that energy in the batteries and then use it at a different time when you need it during the day. And so it's good that batteries are treated much better in the Senate version. So we like that. So those are kind of some of the good improvements. They also got rid of some of the very technical kind of poison pills that the House version put in there that we can get into if you want to get deep into the weeds.
Oh, I want to get into the weeds.
So there's one called the Foreign Entities of Concern, FEOC, which they're basically the government defines what countries that we consider foreign entities of concern, which are currently China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, I believe, are the four for various geopolitical reasons. So mainly the purpose here is so that we're reducing our reliance on China for these various technologies. We're trying not to import everything from China because then if we have some kind of disagreement with China, like say a bunch of tariffs and wars to do with like fighting like trade wars, then they have a lot of leverage over us. And so the idea, which was part of the idea in the Inflation Reduction Act too, is to create more of a supply chain and more manufacturing in the United States, so we're relying less on China. And so the House version of the bill, it took this to the extreme, and it basically said if you use anything in your project that comes from China, like a nut or a bolt or a piece of copper wire, your project does not qualify for any tax credits whatsoever. And everybody said, wait a second, how are we possibly going to comply with that right away? We use so much stuff, so many different components in our solar arrays and wind turbines and everything. So the Senate said, yeah, that's not so good. Let's try to improve that. And so they did their own Foreign Entities of Concern FEOC language, which folks are still looking at to see if it's workable. I think it seems like it's at least more workable than the extreme House version. So that was an improvement. Hopefully, like people are still like, this is very complicated, detailed language. So they're still trying to still figure out, is this going to work for like my technology? And so hopefully it's definitely an improvement. We'll just see how much of an improvement it is. Another one was transferability of the tax credits, because these things are tax credits. And so what it's basically saying, if you qualify for this, we will give you some credits to offset your taxes in the next year. But small companies, they might not have very much tax liability. And so getting a big credit to offset their taxes doesn't do them much good. And so the Inflation Reduction Act made these transferable. And so they can take that tax credit and send it to another business, so they can sell it on a marketplace basically. And so it makes it much easier for them to use, whereas the House version would have taken that out and kind of gone back to the way it used to be done, which is basically like you have to then, if you don't have much tax liability, if you're like a small solar company, you have to partner with some kind of entity that has a lot of tax liability, which is like basically a big financial institution. And then they're going to take a cut. They're going to say, well, you got to work with me. And so I'm going to take some of that tax liability money and you're going to be able to use less of it in your solar project, and I'm going to take some of it. And so it just makes the tax credits less efficient to take away the transferability. And so everybody was like, why are you taking away the transferability? And it was basically to make it less usable. And so the Senate took that out. They said, no, we're going to leave the transferability in. So that's a nice improvement because it just makes it more like your taxpayer dollars are actually going to the clean energy as opposed to going to like a bank. So that's a good thing.
So it is a little bit in the weeds, but
yes,
it does sound like the metaphor we've been using internally on our staff calls is like the House bill really, really dug us a hole. and the Senate version kind of put some shovelfuls back in. So we love a good metaphor. So
Yes.
we lobbied, we emailed, and it's an improvement.
It is definitely improvement. The House version was quite bad, and the Senate version, like, they definitely took some significant measures to get rid of some of the bad things in the House version. So we made some progress. That's worth celebrating. It's not as bad. It's an improvement.
And now we're going to stop celebrating because we're going to let's talk impacts. As our resident nerd, I know you've been pouring over 10 to 15 different studies on the impacts of repealing the IRA clean energy tax credits. So let's talk impacts. What's the headline here if we lose these tax credits or they're phased out?
Yeah, so I mean, specifically, I looked at about 8 or so of these reports.
10
Didn't
to
quite make
15,
it, didn't quite make it in the 10-15 range, but around 8 to 10 maybe. And so I think the headline impact is that it would, if the tax credits are repealed, or the more of them that are repealed, the higher our energy bills are going to be for households. Yeah, nobody likes higher energy bills. And that includes higher gasoline bills, which everybody really hates and politicians are very scared of, higher electricity bills, and also higher natural gas bills. So lots of different types of energy. And then the costs all go up.
How much? How much we talking?
So gasoline prices will go up. There's a couple of different estimates, but in the range of 3 to 25 cents per gallon. So it's a fairly significant increase in gasoline prices. That's because if you repeal the electric vehicle tax credit, you're going to sell a lot fewer EVs. And so a lot more people are going to be driving gas cars. Burning more gasoline increases the demand for gasoline, which increases the price of gasoline.
Ooh, a little economics.
A little
Okay.
economics, a little supply and demand.
Bonus.
Yeah. And then electricity bills will go up somewhere in the ballpark of $100 per year per household. And vehicle costs, because of those increased gasoline costs, and because fewer people are going to have EVs, which EVs have significantly cheaper fueling costs than gasoline cars by almost $1,000 per year. If you combine those, so it's about $100 per year per household for higher electricity costs, about $100 per year per household and higher vehicle fuel costs, and then natural gas costs kind of get wrapped in there too. Because if you have less clean electricity, then you have to burn more natural gas, and so then again, supply and demand, natural gas prices go up. And so if you have natural gas appliances in your house, like a stove or a furnace, or your heating, your household heating, your HVAC is natural gas, then you have to pay that as well, or the higher natural gas prices that go along with that as well. So if you lump it all together, it's somewhere in the range of about $1,000 to $3,000 over the next 10 years increase in overall average household energy costs.
Dana, I'm going to dare to speak on behalf of the listener. I'm going to say we, the collective we, the listeners and I, are not loving this news. This
Me
is
either.
horrible.
Yeah, I don't want to pay an extra $2,000 and over the next 20 years or 10 years. That's a lot of money.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, in terms of like not just individual impacts, I mean, let's talk about manufacturing and jobs too.
Yeah, so we've had sort of a clean energy manufacturing boom since the Inflation Reduction Act passed. We've had especially a lot of investments in battery manufacturing and also EVs and solar panels. And so the problem is those investments in those facilities were made because companies knew they were going to get the benefit associated with these tax credits. And if you start to take the tax credits away, suddenly these companies are going to stop building so much new manufacturing capacity because there's not going to be the market of people buying them. Like if there's no EV tax credit, a lot fewer people are going to buy EVs, and so you're not going to have to make as many batteries or EVs. And so, for example, the Princeton team estimated that if the EV tax credits are repealed as was proposed in both the House and Senate versions within the next six months, that means that EV demand goes down by like 20 to 40 million over the next 10 years. There's going to be like some tens of millions fewer EVs on American roads in 2035 as if the EV tax credits were to stay in place. And so that significant decrease in demand means we already have enough manufacturing capacity in place in the United States of building batteries and EVs that we're not going to need to build any more manufacturing. If we build any more manufacturing, we're just not going to end up using it because there's not going to be enough people buying those EVs. And in fact, we might already have too much capacity, and so companies might have to reduce their manufacturing output. And if they have to do that, then they have to lay off workers. And so that means you also get a loss in jobs, which we'll probably get to next.
This whole conversation is so painful. Everybody, the only way out is through. Let's talk about jobs.
Yeah, so exactly, if you reduce that demand for the products like the EVs and then you reduce the need for manufacturing, you're also going to lose jobs. And also, if you're reducing the amount of clean energy we're deploying, solar panels, wind turbines, and solar and wind farms, then you're going to have to manufacture fewer of those too, and you're going to have fewer construction jobs to actually build those solar and wind farms. Because the estimates are, if we go by the House version and immediately phase out the tax credits for clean electricity, then the amount of solar and wind we're going to build over the next 10 years is basically going to be half as much as it would otherwise have been. It might be a little bit better with the Senate version because the Senate gave them a little bit of a runway, but it's probably not going to be a whole lot better. So in the ballpark of half as much clean power facilities built. And so if you kind of estimate those, like the impact on jobs altogether, which several of these reports did, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of lost jobs in manufacturing and construction, and also like throughout the economy. Because like when these folks have construction jobs and manufacturing jobs, then they get these salaries and they spend that money on like food and products and, clothes and shoes and things like that. And that money goes throughout the economy and creates more jobs because you have more demand for stuff. So if you're taking that money away from those workers, then it pulls money out of the economy and costs even more jobs. So overall, hundreds of thousands of total jobs lost.
Okay, so we're paying more money, we're losing manufacturing, we're losing jobs, we're losing GDP. Talk to me about energy security.
Yeah, so one issue we're facing is that we have a very large increase in demand for electricity all of a sudden because we have a lot of data centers that we're building because there's a lot of artificial intelligence, really rapid development. And to train your artificial intelligence machines, you need a lot of power from these, or a lot of data centers, a lot of power. And we're also seeing more and more people buy electric cars and electrify their homes with heat pumps and things like that. And we're also seeing higher temperatures due to global warming. It means people have to use more air conditioning. So all these things are kind of conspiring to suddenly significantly increase the amount of electricity that we're using. Whereas over the past 20 years, it was almost flat because like we didn't have all this data center and AI development, and we were doing a good job at becoming more energy efficient. And so now all this new demand for power is just going to overwhelm that. And so the projections are that over the next 10 years, our power demand growth is going to be at somewhere probably in the range of 5 to 10 times faster than it was over the prior 20 years. And so, yeah, that's going to create issues, especially if we are now pulling out the incentives for clean electricity facilities to be built, because that's kind of the fastest thing you can build. And so if you have this really rapid increase in demand and you're not able to keep up with increasing supply fast enough, because now there's not enough financial incentive for the solar and wind facilities to get built, or at least as many of them, then suddenly you're creating this mismatch where there's really high demand, not high enough supply, and that can create the conditions for more blackouts and power outages, and thus decreased energy security.
Yeah, why did solar and wind get the short end of the stick here? What did they ever do?
The argument is that they are now mature technologies, and so they don't need the tax credits. And there's, some validity to that because they have become much more, like, technologies have advanced and become cheaper. The problem is that they're really pulling the rug out from them in terms of getting rid of the tax credits really fast that a lot of these projects were depending on. And so that just changes the finances. There's a case to be made to get rid of the tax credits, but just it makes more sense to do it over a longer period of time, phase them out like over many years as opposed to phasing them out over like a year or two. And also, the Trump administration also just generally hates wind altogether. Is the other thing. Wind got treated especially badly in this bill because the Trump administration doesn't like it.
This is an audio medium, so I want the record to state that I am squinting my eyes suspiciously in disapproval for the listener at home. All right, there can't be any more bad impacts, right, Dana? Right? That's the end? There's no more to talk about?
Well, you mentioned the GDP, which we didn't go into the details of that, but again, if you're deploying less energy, building less, manufacturing, less clean energy, less jobs, that has a general impact throughout the economy, which, as you mentioned, reduces GDP. The estimates are that it reduces our GDP by about $1 trillion over the next decade, which is a big number, especially when you consider that the savings of these tax credit repeals are about $500 billion. And so you're kind of basically losing a much bigger savings over time, or a much bigger amount of money over time than you're saving by repealing the tax credits, which is not very good long-term thinking. So that's another bad impact.
One could say, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's air pollution and people's health, because if you are getting fewer EVs, more people burning gasoline in their cars, fewer clean energy facilities, so more burning of fossil fuel and power plants, all that extra burning of fossil fuels from tailpipes and smokestacks creates local air pollution, and people breathe that air pollution, and then it causes all kinds of bad health effects. So energy innovation, which is one of the reports that I looked over, estimated several thousand additional premature deaths over the next decade because of people breathing this pollution. They didn't put numbers on it, but there's a lot of other adverse health impacts like asthma and dementia and all kinds of bad things that happen when you're breathing more air pollution. And then, of course, there is the climate pollution as well, which is very important
Oh, you're
to
still
us.
going.
I'm
Okay,
still
there's
going.
more.
The climate pollution, yes. Of course, if we reduce all these clean energy deployments, then you get more greenhouse gas emissions, and you're significantly further away from your prior climate commitments than you would otherwise be. And so we'll only be about 20 to 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, whereas we had in our Paris commitment previously committed to being more than 50% below 2005 levels by 2030. And so we're going to be well short of our climate targets as well.
All right, Dana, thank you so much for bringing the vibe down today. It could not be lower.
Can you call me? I'm going to rename myself Captain Bring Down today.
Really bad vibes on this call. We got to bring it back up. So let's summarize what happened this week. So the IRA clean energy tax credits, we would like to keep them intact. The Senate version of the budget does not keep them intact. It is not as bad as the House version in terms of clean energy tax cuts. It is not as bad as the House version in terms of clean energy tax credit cuts. Does that sound right?
It is not as bad.
Yay.
Yay.
So what comes next? What can we expect from DC now that the Senate has released their version of the bill?
So we talked about how it's going to go through the bird bath, and then probably most of the provisions will survive because the senators try to pull out things that they expect won't survive the bird bath. And in fact, there is a relevant one for electric vehicles. The House had put in sort of an EV penalty, or like a fee that EV owners have to pay of $250 per year, and hybrid owners would have to pay $100 per year, basically to pay for road maintenance kind of things.
Oh, I hate that in the state of Ohio.
You would have to double pay it. So
that would be great. So great. No notes on that.
Yeah, there are a number of states that have this. This would be a federal one that everybody has to pay if you own an EV or a hybrid. But the Senate pulled that out probably because they expected it wouldn't survive the bird bath, because that is kind of regulatory. Yeah. So hopefully that stays out. So in any case, the bird bath is going to happen. The parliamentarians looking over all the provisions. That takes something like a week. And there will probably be more negotiations between the Senate and the House in the meantime, because there have already been members of the House who said, I can't vote for this version of the Senate bill for one reason or another. They all have their kind of different priorities and things that the Senate changed that they say, that's a bridge too far for me. That goes past my red line. So they're going to have more negotiations and more changes before, once the bird bath is done, then it ultimately goes to a vote on the floor of the Senate if they expect they can get a majority of senators to vote for it. But then they also need a majority of members of the House to vote for it, because they don't really want another version change to go back and forth. So there's going to be more negotiations until they can try to come to that final version of the bill that a majority of Republicans in both the House and the Senate are willing to vote for. So that's going to take some time. It's hard to say how much time. Depends how belligerent everybody is and how good they are at negotiating. So that's what's coming next.
What I'm hearing is the listeners stuck with us. Somebody has to walk the people through this.
I guess
this is
so.
A lot.
Yeah.
Right. I also love the drama of surviving the bird bath. Somebody should make a documentary with that title, because we'll leave it to Congress.
You never know what predators are hovering around the bird bath.
So what can we do right now? So the good news is we have a fresh action ready for anybody who is represented by a Republican senator. You can visit cclusa.org/IRA defense to urge your senator to call on Senate leadership to better preserve clean energy tax credits in this bill. Because, Dana, you said that we have read that the Senate is still open to negotiating.
They are. They've said they're still open to make changes. They have to make changes because they don't have a bill that's got a majority of votes yet. So harass them until they make it a better bill. That's my philosophy.
Politely ask them at cclusa.org/IRA defense. So thank you, Dana, as always, for this fantastic update on the IRA clean energy tax credits. We at CCL have been working to defend these tax credits since last November, but I feel like every month there's like new information, there's new updates. So thank you for doing the work and keeping us posted.
I feel like it's every day.
At this point, I agree.
Thanks, Elissa.
We love hearing from you, the listener, and I have 2 voicemails to share with you today. And Dana, I need you to answer the first one because it is a question for you. So here is our first voicemail.
Hi there. I really enjoyed your recent Saving Clean Energy Tax Credits episode. And I'd love to request maybe a deeper dive into how the removal of the 45L tax credit from the IRA and potentially, too, the ending of the Energy Star program, which has been around since the mid-90s. It's bipartisan. How that will impact homeowners and what they pay monthly on their energy bills, and how that's such an important message as you lobby Congress and Senate and their understanding of how these clean tax credits could actually impact the daily lives of their constituents, just in their homes and those utility costs that are going higher and higher. So if you don't mind, love to hear more of that. And again, really enjoyed your show.
Yeah, so that is a great question. So 45L is the tax credit for making new homes energy efficient. So if a home developer builds a building so that it's got really good insulation and windows and maybe energy efficient appliances, and so there's an Energy Star standard for new homes. If it meets that, then they can get a tax credit for that, basically. And then the Energy Star program in general is just a really nice program, or it was a really nice program, in which there's just a certification that this particular appliance is energy efficient and it meets the Energy Star standard. And so it gets the stamp of Energy Star approval. And it tells people, if you buy this appliance, then you're going to be saving energy. And both those things, like saving energy and being energy efficient in general, is good for a lot of reasons. I mean, just for the homeowner, if you're using less energy by having an energy efficient home and energy efficient appliances, that means your energy bills are going to be lower. And that's a really good thing. It also means that that home is using less energy at a time where, as we talked about, energy demand is going up and up and up. And so the reason it didn't go up in the prior 2 decades is because we got more energy efficient because of programs like Energy Star. And now we're getting rid of these programs at a time when energy demand is going up. So if we get rid of all our energy efficiency, our tax credits to make homes energy efficient, our Energy Star program, that's going to make our energy demand go up even faster at a time where it's already going up too fast, which again is going to make electricity bills go up even higher. So yeah, this is bad stuff. I hope somebody will step in and maybe create some kind of third-party Energy Star equivalent so that consumers can still have the information available to them to buy energy-efficient appliances. And I hope home builders will still make the effort to make energy-efficient buildings, although now there's not going to be a tax credit for that after very much time. But come on, let's keep some energy efficiency. Efficiency is a good thing.
Thank you, Dana. Everybody listening, please let us know when you start a third-party Energy Star efficiency company, and we'll give you a shout-out on the show because it sounds like we need it. Our second voicemail comes from a longtime CCL volunteer.
Hello, Peterson and the team. This is Craig Preston, Orange County Coast Chapter member of Citizens Climate Lobby. Why do I listen? My mood comes up as I stay online thinking, oh my goodness, it's like a 40-minute episode. Would I really want to do that? I find myself addicted to these short radio shows, news shows, and yet every time I come to listen to CCL radio, I find a boost to my mood and my inspiration and my energy for more activism. So thank you for the gift of that.
Craig, that's so nice. Thank you so much for saying that. You are the best, and I look forward to seeing you in July at the CCL Summer Conference and Lobby Day. So what about you? You have a question, a story to share, comments on the show? You can call or text our listener line at 619-512-9646. That's 619-512-9646. So let's segue into the conference. Actually, I got one last question for you, Dana. I want to give our good listeners a sneak peek about what they can expect to see from us at the summer conference. So what sessions can we expect to hear you present this year in July?
I'll be moderating a breakout session related to our Healthy Forest Policy Agenda, talking with a panel of experts on things like wildfires and climate change and the Fix Our Forests Act and planting lots more trees and things like that. So that'll be really interesting. And then Jen Tyler and I, VP of Government Affairs, will likely be doing some talking about what's happening with the Inflation Reduction Act and the budget reconciliation, because we can't get enough of that topic. Unless Congress has already passed a reconciliation bill by then, in which case then we'll have to figure out something else to do.
We'll just do a live podcast.
Ooh,
and I will be doing a social media breakout. So we hope you join us July 20th through 22nd in Washington, D.C. You can register now at cclusa.org/conference. And next episode, I think we'll be talking about this again and covering new updates. I mean, honestly, next time we get on the mic, we could have a finalized bill from both chambers in Congress, or we could be in about the same place or somewhere in the middle. You never know, because budget reconciliation is a process. But we are committed to keeping you posted and taking action every step of the way. So we'll let you know what comes next in our next episode. But thank you for listening to this one. Back to Peterson to close things out.
Hey, thank you. Bird bathed. I'm so glad that no actual birds were harmed in the bathing process. I've been hearing that phrase a lot lately, and I'm glad that you broke it down for me and the rest of the listeners. And speaking of Energy Stars, we have a new star that has risen here at Citizens Climate Lobby, one who is very important to the show. On the June 2025 CCL monthly call in which you, Dana, talked about the IRA, CCL board chair Bill Blancato made a big announcement.
Hey, everybody, I'm Bill Blancato. I've been a CCL volunteer since 2013. In 2014, I helped start the second chapter in North Carolina, and I've worn several hats in CCL: group leader, regional coordinator, state coordinator, liaison. Last year, I joined the CCE board, and earlier this year, I transitioned to the CCL board and became chair of the CCL board on June 1. The leadership update I want to share with you is that Rachel Carestas, our current executive director, has notified us that she's going to resign her position effective July 15. Together with Sandy and the other board members, we've offered Ricky Bradley, our VP of Field Operations, the role of interim executive director. And I'm happy to report that Ricky has accepted that offer, and he'll officially assume the role on July 16. Rachel and those of us on the boards are working together to ensure a smooth transition with Ricky. I'm grateful to Rachel for her efforts, and I'm excited about where Ricky's leadership can take us from here. He's been with the organization for over 13 years as a volunteer and staff member, and he's the perfect person to take over from Rachel next month and carry our mission forward. Ricky, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Bill. I am deeply honored by this opportunity. For those of you who don't know me or haven't had a chance to get to know you, as Bill mentioned, I've been a part of CCL for quite a while. I started as a volunteer in January of 2012. Something that might resonate with a lot of you. I held my first chapter meeting the following month at my kitchen table with my spouse and one other person. I was so excited that one other person showed up for that meeting. After volunteering full-time for 2 years, former executive director Mark Reynolds invited me to join the CCL staff in 2014. And since then, I've worn a lot of hats. I've helped relaunch our main website, started Citizens Climate University, was our effort to scale and our training and education nationwide. and created CCL Community. But later, I was also had the opportunity to become the regional coordinator for Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Oklahoma. Those are my favorite memories of CCL, coming from those summer days, traveling those states with Susan Adams, Peter Brand, and Brett Cease in cars that had little or no AC, and just staying with volunteers or wherever we could find a bed sometimes. Those are the moments that I'll always hold dear to myself. In 2018, Madeline Parra gave me the opportunity to become the director of IT. And then late last year, when Brett decided to step away as VP of operations, Rachel asked me to step in and really build on the incredible foundation that Brett and our regional directors had built. The words were barely out of her mouth before I said yes. I'm excited for this opportunity. Before CCL, I worked at HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. For them, I was leading strategic planning and implementation efforts. But from the moment I found CCL, I knew I'd found my place. I was then, and I still am, moved by CCL founder Marshall Saunders' vision that respectful, persistent, nonpartisan advocacy will move policymakers and others, even when the odds seem long. I fully realize that what makes CCL possible isn't just the strategy, it's the people, it's us, it's the relationships we built together. The power of CCL comes from all of us. It's volunteers, staff, donors, and our board who show up again and again with all of us with a clarity of purpose and a lot of passion. I know that.
At Citizens Climate Radio, Ricky Bradley has a soft spot in our hearts. Ricky first approached me about creating this podcast almost 10 years ago. So, as Bill said, Ricky has been with the organization for a long time. So, Ricky, congratulations. If you want to see Ricky in action, come to the Citizens Climate Lobby's summer conference. It is held from July 20th to the 22nd, 2025 in Washington, D.C. Learn more, sign up at cclusa.org/conference. And you'll also get to meet Dana and Elissa and see them in person. So you can see if they actually have a filter on in the video version or if this is real. There's no filter. There's no filter.
No filters.
So as Elissa said, if you got a story to share, leave us a voicemail. You can even text us at the following number, 619-512-9646, +1 if you're calling from outside the USA. That's 619-512-9646. You'll find show notes and links at cclusa.org/radio. And I just want to remind you one more time, you can take action to protect clean energy tax credits. Visit cclusa.org IRA Defense. This episode was written by Elissa Tennant and Dana Nuccitelli and me, Peter Santoscano. I also did the recording and editing. Although there was no editing in this one, there were no mistakes. Music comes from Epidemic Sound. Citizens Climate Radio is a project of Citizens Climate Education. Stay strong, determined, and creative in your work on climate change.